Have you ever had a moment so perfect, so crystal clear, that you just knew someone was about to shatter it? I was standing under the warm, heavy lights of the main banquet hall at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was holding the Harrington Award for Investigative Journalism. This wasn't just a trophy, it was the highest honor in my field. It was validation. It was 18 months of my life, 18 months of 4 a.m. wake-up calls, of digging through impenetrable offshore account records, of facing down threats from lawyers in $1,000 suits who were paid more per hour than I made in an entire month. My editor, Marcus, was beaming from our table, raising his glass. My colleagues, the people I respected most in the world, were on their feet. I had done it. I, Sarah, the complicated daughter, the difficult one, the perpetual family disappointment. I had won. I made my way off the stage, my adrenaline humming so loud I could barely hear the individual congratulations. People were shaking my hand, clapping me on the shoulder, their faces genuine and impressed. And then I saw her, my mother, Karen. She was shouldering her way through the crowd, my father, David, trailing in her wake. Her face was a mask of strained politeness, like someone smelling something unpleasant at a party. I instinctively braced, my stomach tightening. I searched her eyes for a spark of pride, for a single genuine flicker of joy for me. There was nothing. She grabbed my arm. It wasn't a hug. It was a grip, a way to anchor me, to stop my momentum. Her first words to me, on the single greatest night of my entire professional life, were not congratulations. She leaned in, and her voice was a sharp, sibilant whisper, just loud enough to be overheard by the people nearest to us. Sarah, thank goodness. Stop posing. Your Aunt Elaine is here. We have real news. I froze. The 10-pound gold-plated award in my hand suddenly felt like cheap plastic. My triumph, my speech, my entire career, it all evaporated in that one sharp, dismissive sentence. Real news. As in, what I had just achieved was, what? A fantasy? A child's game? I knew in that instant that this wasn't an oversight. It was a declaration. It was a public correction. My success was not just irrelevant to them. It was an inconvenience, and they had come to my party, to my night of triumph, specifically to put me back in my place. What they didn't know is that I was no longer the person who would just stand there and take it. They had no idea who I had become, what I had learned, and the devastating power I was holding in reserve. They thought they were coming to correct a difficult child. They had no idea they were walking directly into their own execution. If you asked my family to describe me, they would all land on the same word: complicated. Complicated is their code word. It's the polite, passive-aggressive term they use for disappointing. It means I didn't follow the script. It means I didn't go to UVA law like my cousin. It means I didn't marry a bland, wealthy man named Brad or Chad by 26. It means I didn't give them the grandchildren they could parade around the Arlington Country Club by 28. No, I was complicated. I chose a career that made them uncomfortable. Investigative journalism, Sarah dear, it's just so grubby, my mother Karen would say, wrinkling her nose as if I've just told her I was a professional dumpster diver. And it sounds dangerous. All that, digging. Why can't you just write about, I don't know, art galleries? Your cousin Jessica loves art galleries. Ah, Jessica. My entire life is a story written in the margins of the book of Jessica. My cousin Jessica, my Aunt Elaine's daughter, is my golden child. She is the sun around which our family orbits. She is the standard against which all my life choices were measured and inevitably found wanting. We're the same age, 31. We grew up in the same affluent suburb of Arlington, Virginia. We went to the same schools. But where I was quiet and buckish, Jessica was bubbly and popular. Where I questioned things, Jessica simply agreed. She was a perfect, polished mirror, reflecting back everything our parents wanted to see in a daughter. So, she went to UVA Law. She joined a prestigious DC corporate law firm. She is blonde, polite, and has never, in her entire 31 years, held a single opinion that would make anyone in the room uncomfortable. She is engaged to a man named Brad, who works in asset management and whose personality is as bland as his name. Jessica is everything my parents, David and Karen, ever wanted. She is a status symbol. She is easy. I am complicated. I am also the family fixer. I'm the invisible mechanic they keep in the garage, the one they only call when the engine is smoking and they don't know what to do. While they were all out at brunch celebrating Jessica's latest promotion, I was the one on the phone for 3 hours with their insurance company, patiently but firmly fighting a denied claim because my father David couldn't be bothered to read his own policy. I was the one they called at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night to just look over a 40-page mortgage refinancing document because I'm good with details. I was the one who had to patiently and repeatedly explain to my father how to attach a file to an email or why he shouldn't click on links from Nigerian princes. They used my intelligence as a free utility, but they scorned the ambition that sharpened it. I'll never forget my junior year of college. I had just won the university's top prize for an essay on economic policy. It came with a $5,000 grant and a dinner with the university president. I was over the moon. I called home, bursting with the news. My mother's reaction, "Oh, that's nice, dear. That's very nice. Listen, I can't talk long. Your Aunt Elaine is on the other line. Guess what? Jessica just got a summer internship at her father's firm. We're all going out to celebrate tonight. It's just wonderful, a real step in her career. A $5,000 academic prize versus a nepotism-fueled internship filing papers. I didn't even get a congratulations. My prize was nice. Her internship was real. That was the moment I stopped trying. That was the moment I realized they didn't just not see me. They actively chose not to. My accomplishments were invisible to them because they were the wrong kind of accomplishments. They weren't stable, they weren't prestigious in their world, and they didn't reflect well on them at the country club. My work, the very thing that honed my skills, was a source of quiet, constant shame for them. They lived in a world of smooth, polished appearances. My job was to dig under the appearances. My job was to find the rot, and my family, more than anything, was terrified of rot. We just had to tell the Sharmas you were on assignment, my mother said, her voice laced with martyrdom, after I missed their annual neighborhood barbecue. I hadn't been on assignment. I'd been in a motel in West Virginia for 2 weeks, interviewing minors whose pensions had been systematically stolen by a corrupt executive. We just couldn't bear to tell them where you really were, Sarah. It's so bleak, so unpleasant. They never read a single article I wrote, not one. They praised Jessica for being a partner at her firm. They praised me for being good with a computer. They treated me like a child, a strange, moody child who had a weird, dirty hobby. They lived in their comfortable Arlington house, drove their leased Lexuses, and went to their club, all while dismissing the one person in the family who was actually building something real, something tangible, something true. They were so obsessed with the idea of Jessica, the perfect, polished reflection of their own shallow values, that they never ever bothered to look at me. They never saw me, and that was their single greatest mistake. They forgot that the grubby ball job they hated had taught me one thing above all else, how to find the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried. And I was about to use those skills to find theirs. Let's be perfectly clear, I don't hate my cousin Jessica. You can't hate a hologram. Jessica is a projection. She is a two-dimensional image of perfect daughterhood that my parents and her parents, Aunt Elaine and Uncle Robert, manufactured and worshipped. She's not a bad person. She's not even an interesting person. She is a creature of pure, unadulterated privilege, so insulated from reality that she has no sharp edges. Her voice is always soft. Her opinions are always the most popular ones in the room. Her greatest passion in life is genuinely finding the right shade of gray for her new townhouse. I saw her at a family gathering about a year ago. I was just back from a grueling assignment in Louisiana, working on a story about environmental racism. I was tired. I was probably a little frayed, and I was talking to my uncle about it. Jessica floated over holding a glass of champagne and smiled that dazzling, empty smile. Oh, Sarah, she said, cutting me off mid-sentence. That sounds so stressful. Are you still doing that? Chasing all those sad people? You really must come with me to my new Barry class. It would just do wonders for your energy. She had no malice. She was just vacant. She was the golden child because she was a perfect, empty vessel for their ambitions. Her accomplishments were their accomplishments. Her life was the one they felt they deserved. But Jessica isn't the real villain. She's just the symptom, the disease. That's my parents, David and Karen, and my aunt and uncle, Robert and Elaine. They're two identical units, obsessed with one thing and one thing only, appearances. Their house in Arlington wasn't a home, it was a stage. Every piece of furniture was chosen from a catalog, designed to look expensive, but was ultimately uncomfortable. The sofas were stiff, the carpets were a pale, impractical cream. You couldn't sit anywhere without feeling like you were about to break something. It was a house for showing, not for living. My father, David, works in finance. That's as specific as he ever gets. For my entire life, it's just been finance. It's a vague, important-sounding word that allowed him to wear a suit, carry a briefcase, and complain about the stock market. In reality, he's a mediocre wealth manager who has spent his life churning the accounts of a few long-suffering clients. He's a man of grand gestures and zero follow-through. My mother, Karen, is his enabling partner. Her entire life's work is social management. She manages the family's image. She serves on committees. She organizes brunches. And she ensures that the family's brand is never, ever tarnished. And I was a tarnished. My grubby job was a constant threat to their carefully constructed illusion. What if I wrote about someone they knew? What if I angered someone at the club? When I started the investigation that would eventually win me the Harrington Award, I made the mistake of mentioning it to them. I told them I was looking into a massive, multi-state financial fraud scheme. My father's reaction wasn't, "Be careful, Sarah, that sounds dangerous." It wasn't, "Good for you, go get them." No, he put down his fork, looked at me with genuine alarm, and said, "For God's sake, Sarah, is it anyone local? I hope to God you're not gigging around Arlington. Ted Sharma's brother-in-law is in banking. Can you imagine the embarrassment if this splashes back on us? Not my safety, not the crime, the embarrassment." That was the moment I fully understood. They don't just prefer Jessica. They need her. They need her vapid, predictable, status-affirming success to blot me out. Her partnership at the law firm, her blandly handsome fiancé, her expensive wedding, all of it was a testament to their success as parents. It was their armor against the shame of having a complicated daughter like me. They lived in this bubble, all four of them, propping each other up, validating their own shallow existence, and praising Jessica as their shared idol. They were so busy polishing the exterior of their lives that they never once bothered to check the foundations. They had no idea their entire performance, their house of cards, was built on a lie. A lie so rotten it was about to bring the whole thing crashing down. They had no idea that their entire, comfortable, superior world was being paid for by a secret they'd long forgotten. And they certainly had no idea that I was the one who had just found the receipts. The Harrington Award is the final, most prestigious award of the night. When they called my name, I genuinely blacked out for a second. The applause sounded like it was coming from underwater. I remember walking to the stage, my legs shaking. I had my speech on a note card, but I didn't look at it. I looked out at that sea of faces, the titans of my industry, the people I had admired my whole life, and I spoke from the heart. 18 months ago, I started, my voice trembling only slightly. I got a tip from a woman in rural Pennsylvania. Her husband's pension had vanished, just disappeared. The company said it was a clerical error. The local paper said it was old news. But she knew it was a lie. I told them about her. I told them about the sleepless nights, about the wall in my apartment covered in string and index cards, tracing shell companies from Delaware to the Cayman Islands. I talked about the moment I found the central ledger, the Rosetta Stone that proved a board of executives had systematically siphoned over $200 million from 3,000 working families. This award, I finished, holding it up, isn't for me. It's for Mary. It's for every person who has been told they are old news. Our job as journalists is to never, ever let them be silenced. The applause was deafening. It was a standing ovation. I walked off that stage on air, my face hurting from smiling. Marcus, my editor, was the first to grab me. He pulled me into a huge bear hug. Sarah, that was transcendent, he said, his eyes shining. You are a force of nature. We are so goddamn proud of you. My colleagues swarmed me. Hands were shaking mine, people were patting my back. Incredible speech. Pulitzer worthy. You're a damn rock star, Sarah. I was dizzy with it. I was, for the first time in my life, completely and totally seen. And that's when the bubble burst. Sarah, thank goodness. My mother's voice cut through the warm buzz like a shard of ice. She, my father, my Aunt Elaine, and my Uncle Robert had pushed their way through the circle of my colleagues. They looked impatient. Marcus, ever the polite boss, stepped forward. David, Karen, you must be bursting with pride. Sarah just delivered the speech of the night. My mother gave him a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Oh, yes, yes. It's all very nice, she said. She actually waved her hand at my award, the one I was still clutching, the way you dismiss a street performer. We always knew her little hobby would lead to something. Eventually. Hobby. The word hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of my lungs. I saw Marcus's smile falter. I saw the confused, embarrassed looks on my colleagues' faces as they slowly began to back away, sensing they were intruding on something deeply, profoundly, ugly. But we were just telling Sarah. My mother continued, her voice rising just enough to recapture the retreating audience. We have real news, truly wonderful news. Jessica, Aunt Elaine, Jessica's mother, surged forward, her eyes gleaming with a predatory, manic triumph. She was the queen bee, and she had just caught wind of a rival. She made junior partner. Aunt Elaine cut in, practically vibrating with glee. At K&L Gates, can you imagine? At her age, a real career. We are just over the moon. My father, David, decided it was his turn to contribute. He put a heavy, condescending hand on my shoulder. That's right, Sarah, he said, in his reasonable dad voice. He was talking at me, but to my boss. We're so thrilled for Jess. And, maybe now that you've gotten this thing out of your system, he gestured vaguely at my Harrington Award. My Harrington Award, maybe you can finally start thinking about settling down, he continued, oblivious. You could use your skills to get a nice, stable job in an office, like Jessica. He finished with a final crushing pat on my shoulder. Honestly, this running around you do, it's tiring for all of us. It's tiring for all of us. The blood drained from my face. The silence that followed was deafening. My colleagues weren't just embarrassed now. They were horrified. They were staring at my family as if they'd just grown second heads. They had just watched, in real time, my family publicly, systematically, and ruthlessly invalidate my entire life's work. They hadn't just overshadowed my moment, they had hijacked it. They had used my spotlight, my achievement, my stage, as nothing more than a platform to stand on so they could shout about Jessica. They had reduced my 18 months of work, the greatest accomplishment of my career, to a hobby, a thing, a childish phase I needed to get out of my system. I looked at my mother. She was smiling, genuinely baffled that I wasn't celebrating with them. I looked at my father, who looked self-satisfied, as if he had just given me some profound, loving advice. Something inside me didn't just break, it crystallized. It turned from a lifetime of simmering resentment into something cold, hard, and perfectly, leftly clear. I took a slow, deliberate step back, forcing my father's hand to drop from my shoulder. I looked at all four of them. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just saw them for what they were: vapid, cruel, and, as I was about to find out, pathetic. "Excuse me," I said, my voice empty of all emotion. "I need some air." I turned my back on them, leaving them standing there with my horrified boss. I walked through the crowded room, past the bar, past the polite, averted eyes of my peers, and pushed open the heavy doors to the hotel balcony. I stepped out into the cold, damp DC night. They thought I was tiring. They thought my work was a hobby. They had no idea that my hobby had been focused on them for the last 6 months, and I had just found the rot. The comfortable, superior life my parents and my aunt and uncle lived, it was all a lie, and the lie was paid for by one man: my grandfather, Arthur. Arthur, my father's father, was nothing like his son. He was an engineer, a man who built bridges. He was quiet, pragmatic, and had zero patience for what he called peacocks, people who lived on status and appearances. He'd built a massive fortune, not on asset management, but on steel, concrete, and contracts. He was the only one in the family who ever respected my work. He'd read my articles, circle them in red pen, and mail them to me with notes. "Good digging, detective," one would say. "You missed a permit filing in '09, said another. He was the only one who saw me when he got sick. 3 years ago, he called me to his study. It was a dark, wood-paneled room that smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. My father and my uncle, Robert, Jessica's dad, were already circling. I could hear them in the hall, discussing liquidating assets and unnecessary overhead. They were vultures, waiting. Their locusts, Sarah, Arthur whispered from his chair. He was frail, but his eyes were sharp. "They'll burn through 50 years of my work before the ground on my grave is even cold." He told me about my father. "Your dad," he sighed, "as the big hat, no cattle, always has. He wants to look like a millionaire, but he doesn't want to do the work. And Robert is just a lazy fool who follows his lead. They'll drain this estate in 5 years, 10 if they're smart, which they aren't." He pushed a thick, leather-bound folder across his desk. "This is a copy. The original is with my lawyer, Henderson. I'm changing the trust. I read the documents. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't just a small change. He was restructuring everything, the entire family fortune, the trust that paid for my parents' house, my aunt's house, their country club memberships. Jessica's startup money for her career was being put under new management. Grandfather, you're making me the sole executor, the only trustee." "That's right," he hissed. "Your father and your uncle are fools. They can't touch the principal. They get a monthly stipend, enough to live, not enough to be stupid. But you, Sarah, you get the keys. You control the account. You approve every extraordinary expense. You're the firewall." He tapped my hand, his skin like paper. "I trust you. You're the only one in this family who actually reads the fine print." When he passed away, the family was devastated. They held a lavish funeral, mostly, I think, to complain about how the stipend he'd left them wasn't quite as large as they'd hoped. But in their arrogance, in their utter dismissal of me, they missed the key detail. They heard stipend and trustee and just assumed it was some anonymous bank manager at Wells Fargo. They never, not once, imagined it was me. I was just Sarah with her hobby. I never corrected them. For 2 years, I silently approved the stipends. I paid the property taxes. I let them believe in their illusion. But 6 months ago, my journalist brain kicked in. The numbers weren't adding up. The stipends were generous, but they weren't buy a new Lexus every year generous. They weren't junior partner buy-in at a DC law firm generous. But I could see the spending, the vacations, the new cars, the constant redecorating. So I used my hobby. I used my full legal power of attorney as trustee to subpoena the real bank records, not the polite monthly summaries the bank sent them, but the deep, raw, transactional data from the last 10 years, it took me weeks. I spent nights after my real job spread out on my living room floor, surrounded by highlighters and bank statements, cross-referencing public LLC filings. It was just like the Harrington investigation. I was building a case. And then I found it, the Rosetta Stone. My father, David, and my uncle, Robert, had been systematically looting my grandfather's trust for years. Even while he was alive and sick, they had set up shell LLCs, Arlington Strategic Consulting, Potomac Property Management. They would submit fake, massively inflated invoices to the trust for consulting fees or property management. My father would approve them in his old, now defunct trustee role, and then they'd transfer the money to their personal accounts. It was blatant, it was clumsy, and it was millions of dollars. And the final, sickening piece of the puzzle, Jessica. Her junior partnership, I found the wire transfer, $250,000 transferred from Arlington Strategic Consulting directly to the law firm's capital account 3 weeks before Jessica's surprise promotion. She hadn't earned her partnership. They bought it for her. They bought her real career with money they stole from my grandfather. Money that was now legally under my control. This was my secret weapon. Not just the power of attorney, it was the 3-inch thick binder sitting in my apartment, filled with bank statements, wire transfers, and fake invoices. Evidence. The kind of cold, hard, undeniable evidence that didn't just end a career, it sent people to prison. I stood on that cold balcony, holding my award, and I let the fury wash over me. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to talk about real careers. They had just given me the green light to show them what my hobby could really do. I didn't go back to the party. I walked out of the Mayflower Hotel, my Harrington Award in my bag, hailed a cab, and went straight to my apartment in Adams Morgan. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The adrenaline from the party had been replaced by something else. A cold, quiet, surgical fury. I put the award on my bookshelf, where it seemed to stare at me, judging. I made a pot of black coffee, sat at my desk, and pulled out the binder. The one labeled Trust. For a moment, I hesitated. This was the final step, the point of no return. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my own family. Was it worth it? And then I heard my mother's voice in my head. Real news. My father's. This. It's tiring for all of us. Aunt Elaine's. A real career. The hesitation vanished. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. This was what my grandfather, Arthur, had trusted me to do. I was the firewall, and the fire had just started. I wasn't an angry daughter anymore. I was a journalist on a deadline, and I was the executor of an estate, uncovering a felony. I spent the next 3 hours organizing the evidence. I wasn't just Sarah anymore. I was my professional self. I wrote a clear, concise, and utterly damning executive summary. It was just like the report I'd submitted to my editor for the Harrington story. It listed the dates, the amounts, the shell company names, and the corresponding bank account numbers. I scanned every fake invoice, every illegal wire transfer. I bookmarked the wire transfer to Jessica's law firm. I created a new document, a cover letter. It wasn't from Sarah. It was from SL, my last name, sole trustee and executor of the Arthur, my last name estate. It was cold. It was formal. It was brutal. It outlined the scope of the fraud, the specific federal statutes they had violated, wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and the immediate actions being taken. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, I made a call, not to my family. I called Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's ancient, terrifying, razor-sharp lawyer, the man who had drafted the trust, and looked at me with knowing eyes when I'd signed the papers 3 years ago. Miss, my last name, he answered on the first ring. His voice was gravelly, like stones in a tumbler. I read about your award in the Post this morning. Arthur would have been proud. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice all business. I'm glad you're in. I'm calling to officially activate my full powers as trustee, effective immediately. We have a significant problem, I see. he said. The warmth was gone, replaced by the lawyer. What do you need? I am emailing you a secured file, I said, my hand hovering over the mouse. You'll see it in a moment. It contains definitive, irrefutable proof of criminal fraud and embezzlement from the trust committed by David and Robert, his last name. And we went in the Ask Max summer. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Go on. I need you to execute 4 actions immediately. First, freeze all assets, all distributions, all direct deposit payments, as of this second. Second, cancel every credit card tied to the trust accounts. All of them. I've attached a list of the card numbers. I heard the furious clack, clack, clack of an old-school keyboard. He was fast. Third, I see a pending payment guarantee for a wedding at the Congressional Country Club for a Miss Jessica. I want you to call them personally and revoke that guarantee. The trust will not be paying for it or any other related expenses. Fourth, I want you to send the executive summary I've provided, along with a formal notice of audit via bike messenger and certified mail to David and Karen, my last name, and Robert and Elaine, his last name. Today. I paused. And Mr. Henderson, make sure my name is at the bottom, in very large, very bold print, as the sole authority. There was a long silence. Then I heard what sounded like a dry, thin, and deeply satisfied smile in his voice. It will be my distinct pleasure, miss, my last name. Consider it done. I clicked send. I hung up the phone. I sat back, staring at my computer screen. The file was gone. The retribution was in motion. It was irreversible. At that very moment, my mother was probably at Tyson's Galleria, trying to buy her mother of the bride dress. My Aunt Elaine was likely on the phone with a florist, confirming the $20,000 flower order. The cards would be declined. The checks would bounce. And by 3 p.m., a terrified courier would be handing them a letter that would detonate the entire foundation of their perfect, curated, and stolen lives. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I just did my job. I found the truth, and for the first time, I was publishing it for my family to read. The explosion came at 12:01 p.m. the next day. It wasn't a phone call. It was a pounding on my apartment door, a frantic, animalistic flesh and bone pounding that rattled the hinges in my water glasses on the shelf. I knew they were coming. I'd been waiting. I'd made coffee. I looked through the peephole. It was all 4 of them, my mother, my father, my aunt, and my uncle. They looked undone. My mother's eyes were red and swollen. My father's face was a mottled, dangerous shade of purple. Aunt Elaine looked like a rabid animal. I opened the door. They didn't wait for an invitation. They stormed in, a wave of fury and expensive perfume. They filled my small Adams Morgan living room. You, my Uncle Robert roared. He was shaking a piece of paper in his hand, the letter from Henderson. You little bitch, what did you do? What did you do? I stopped you from stealing, I said. My voice was quiet, calm. It seemed to make them even angrier. Stealing, shrieked my Aunt Elaine. Her mask of suburban grace was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. You're talking about stealing? You just ruined my daughter. You ruined her wedding. The country club called. They canceled. The caterer. This is jealousy. You've always been a jealous, spiteful little jealous of what? I cut her off, my voice just as quiet. The partnership you bought for her, was it $250,000, or did I misread the wire transfer from Arlington Strategic Consulting? Elaine's mouth snapped shut. She looked like I'd struck her. My father, David, stepped forward, trying to regain control. This was the intimidation phase. That's enough, Sarah. I am your father. You will not speak to your aunt that way. I don't know what fantasy you've cooked up in your head, what hobby this is, but you are going to call that lawyer and you are going to fix this now. I don't think so, I said. And then, right on cue, my mother collapsed onto my sofa. This was the guilt trip phase. It was a masterful performance. My heart, she gasped, clutching her chest, her voice a strangled whisper. Oh, David, I can't breathe. She's killing me. After everything we've done for her, our own daughter, throwing us on the street, how could you, Sarah? Your father's heart can't take this. You're ungrateful. You're a monster. It was textbook, theatrics, accusations, guilt. They hit every note. I've already called the family. Aunt Elaine spat, her eyes narrowing. This was the smear campaign phase. They all know. They know what you're doing. They know you've gone crazy, and you're trying to steal the family money. Your grandmother is beside herself. You're finished, Sarah. You'll be a pariah. Are you done? I asked. They all stared at me, stunned by my lack of reaction. My calm was their kryptonite. They needed me to scream. They needed me to cry. They didn't know how to handle this cold, quiet person in front of them. My father tried one last time, his voice low and threatening. You've made a terrible, terrible mistake. We're having a meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., at Henderson's office. You will be there. You will sign the papers to relinquish control of the trust to me and Robert. And then he took a deep, shuddering breath. We will consider forgiving you for this disgusting tantrum. They all stared at me. This was their ultimatum. They genuinely believed, even after I had shown them I held all the cards, that they could still order me around. They still saw me as the complicated child. 10 a.m. at Henderson's, I repeated. Fine, I'll be there. A wave of relief and smug victory washed over their faces. My father nodded, satisfied. Good. See that you are. They turned and walked out, a united front of self-righteousness. They thought they had won. They thought I was coming to surrender. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and leaned against it. They had no idea what was waiting for them at 10 a.m. It wasn't a surrender. It was a sentencing. The payoff. The conference room at Henderson's firm was intimidating. Dark wood, leather chairs, and a long, polished table that reflected the gray DC sky. I got there at 9:45. Henderson was already there, along with two other people, a man and a woman in severe suits, forensic accountants. Henderson explained, shaking my hand. From Deloitte, at 10:02, the family arrived. David, Karen, Robert, and Elaine. And with them, looking pale, confused, and annoyed, was Jessica, the golden child herself. They saw me and sneered. They sat opposite me, a solid wall of indignation. All right, Sarah, my father began, taking charge. We're here. Let's get this over with. Henderson, where are the papers for us to sign? Mr. Henderson just smiled. There are no papers for you to sign, David. Please, take a look at this. He slid 5 copies of a new binder across the table. It was my 3-inch binder, but now it was professionally bound with tabs and an index. What is this? My father said, opening it. That, I said, is my hobby, the one you find so tiring. I watched their faces. It's a moment I will replay in my mind for the rest of my life. I watched the blood drain from my father's. I watched my uncle's hands begin to shake. I watched Jessica's eyes go wide as she saw the wire transfer for her partnership, stamped with the logo of her own law firm. This is my father stammered. Fraud, I supplied. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Shall I go on? You, I pointed to my father and uncle, stole, by our accountant's calculations, just over $1.8 million from my grandfather's trust over 9 years. You. Aunt Elaine looked at me, her face white. You wouldn't do this to your own family. Do what? I asked. My job, uphold my legal fiduciary duty as trustee, the duty my grandfather gave me specifically to stop you? You were right, Dad. This running around I do, it taught me how to find the truth. And the truth is, you're common thieves. Jessica finally spoke, her voice a small, terrified squeak. I didn't know. I didn't know about the money for the... I know, I said, and my voice softened for just a fraction of a second. You were just the golden child. You never had to know. They just bought your life for you and told you that you earned it. That's the real hobby, isn't it? Pretending. I turned back to the parents. Here's what happens now, I said, my voice turning to ice. You have 2 options. Option A, this binder, and a much more detailed one, goes to the district attorney's office. The accountants here will testify. You, I pointed to my father and uncle, will be charged with felony fraud. You will go to prison. The trust will sue you for the full amount, and what's left of your lives will be spent in litigation." My mother let out a small, strangled sob. "Or," I continued, "there is option B. You will sign a full confession, which Mr. Henderson has already drafted. You will immediately liquidate your assets. The houses are sold. The cars are sold. The country club memberships are forfeit. All of it. The money goes back into the trust." Jessica, I looked at her. "You will resign from your partnership, citing personal reasons, and you will sign a promissory note to repay the $250,000 with interest. The trust will not be paying for your wedding. Where will we live?" My mother whispered, her fake tears now very, very real. "My grandfather," I said, "left you a monthly stipend, the one he originally intended for you before you started stealing. It's enough to rent a modest apartment in Fairfax. You'll survive. You just won't be comfortable." "You're a monster," my father whispered, staring at the evidence. "No," I said, standing up. "I'm a journalist. I deal in truth. You built your entire world on a lie, and you despised me because my whole life is about exposing lies." I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at them. They were broken. 4 pale, terrified statues of arrogance finally shattered. "By the way," I said, "you were right, Mom. The news about Jessica was the real news. It was the final piece of evidence I needed to connect the dots. So, thank you for everything." I walked out of the conference room, into the hallway, and I didn't look back. I had lost a family, a toxic, vampiric family that had been draining me my entire life. And in exchange, I got my self-respect. I got the truth. And I finally got to be the one to write the ending.